Hello and welcome back to another episode of Come Over for Dinner. I'm so glad you're joining me today. Today I have a very special guest in the studio. She is a recent NSA graduate, New St. Andrews graduate. Her name is Lillian Tate. Did you graduate last year?
Yep, May of 2022.
Okay.
Yeah.
She's lived in Florida, and then her parents moved to Washington, and so we have to hear the story about how in the world that decision was made. So welcome, Lillian.
Thank you. I'm super excited to be here. I have never been on a podcast, so it's my first time.
Well, me too. Only on my own.
Yeah.
So tell us how you were in Florida for a while growing up.
Yep.
And then tell us the story.
Yeah. So I was born in Portland, and all my family's from the Oregon area. Still, for the most part, all over there. And my parents, when they got married, decided to move our family so my dad could go to seminary at RTS in Orlando, and he was teaching full time and working. So my dad was going. Let me see. So he was teaching and he was going to seminary, full part-time school, full-time teaching. And he was crazy. Like, he would get up at 3 a.m. and to grade papers so that he could be with us on Saturdays. And so they made it work, and he was in seminary for 10 years. So that's why we were there. And then we decided to move because it wasn't the best place to raise a family, because my dad taught in the inner city for 7 years and then taught in the public school system for 3. And then our neighbors were, among many things, drug dealers. As well as like...
So you aren't, like on the beach at a resort?
No. I mean, we were on the beach a lot, but it was not at a resort. And there was usually needles around us. So,
right. It's not a sketchy part of the beach.
Exactly. So my family and our church, we were going to an E-Free church there, and it kind of started to fall apart. Our pastor had to step down, and interim took over. My dad's theology was changing. So there was just a lot of things coming to an end in like 2011. I think that's when it was. So I was 11. And anyway, so our family decided to move back closer to home, and he just put an application for tons of private Christian schools in the area, and got hired in Spokane, and they've been there for the last 11 years.
What school does he work at a school in Spokane?
Yeah, so he works at the Oaks.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah,
school.
yeah. So they used to be in the same league as Logos, but they're not anymore. So.
Okay. And how many siblings altogether?
There's 8 of us.
Family, 8,
yeah, altogether. So
that was a big move.
Yeah. My mom had just had my sister Winifred. She was 6 weeks old when we moved. It was crazy. So we were trying to sell our house. My dad was doing an intensive to finish up seminary. So it was me and my 2 older brothers kind of packing up the house, and my mom was super pregnant, and there's just like painting things, and it was crazy, but it was super fun because we were all homeschooled. We were all really close, and it was a party.
Amazing. It's a party all the time when you're homeschooled.
Yeah.
So ladies, if you're doing a cross-country trip, just think to yourself, are you pregnant?
Yeah.
And giving birth and having a 6-week-old?
Yeah, I know.
The whole process.
My mom is crazy. Everything's so fun with her, and she just makes everything so easy. I look at it now, and I just think, like, we grew up doing cross-country road trips all the time. So, because our family was in Oregon, so we just drove all the time.
Wow.
And I look at her, I'm like, Mom, how did you do that with 6 little kids?
Stressed or upset?
And it was always fun. It was always a good time. And
that's wonderful.
She was just amazing. So definitely inspiration to me.
I'm going to have to get her food tips.
Yes, she can definitely cook. Yeah, for sure.
I have 5 kids, and doing cross-country trips. Well, usually when we went cross-country, because my twin sister lived in Oregon for a long time, and so we would try to save up and do a plane trip. But just even traveling, hours down the road, kids are hungry.
Yep.
We go to Dallas, which was 3 hours away, and I would think, what are all the snacks and breakfast, lunch, and dinner? Everything,
we had coolers. Everything was pre-packed. So food for the road, it was like 5 or 6 days. And we had breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Usually we got dinner at the hotel we were staying at, or a restaurant or something. But she planned everything out. Everything's I didn't even know that like Lunchables existed until I got to college.
Yeah.
Everything was made from scratch.
Her own
Yep.
Lunchables and clothes.
Exactly. Yeah, we had our own homemade bread. Like, I mean, I didn't even know that.
That's incredible. Okay, tell her she's a future guest, whether she wants to be or not.
I will. I'll send her this. Shout out to you, Mom.
Yeah. She's going to have to be our, you know how sometimes people will talk about different things that they're good at. She's going to be the road trip queen.
Yes. Yeah, she totally is.
We actually, a few years back, took all of our kids. This is right before, so my oldest 4 are all in their 20s, and right before they all started flying the nest, which happened practically instantaneously. It was just
sad.
like, yes, it was a hard adjustment. But right before they did, we did a road trip to Florida, which from where we lived at the time, it was maybe 12-hour drive. I could be wrong. Maybe it was 10. Somehow. Anyway. Mm-hmm. But we were gone for a week, and I did something similar. We did eat out some, but I carried tons of food and pre-made it, and froze it, and had a giant cooler packed and all the snacks and all the drinks and, their favorite cookies. But I just remember thinking, oh, it was so amazing while we were there. Mm-hmm. And I remember thinking, oh, this would be so nice to just have, stuff in the freezer. But it did take so much preparation. Mm-hmm. Like, it took so much time to actually have this giant cooler packed full of food and pre-made meals and homemade bread and homemade cookies all at once.
Yep, I know. Yeah, so, and I think people often think,
amazing.
Well, people often think they're like, wow, that must be so hard. And my mom she's such a trooper, but I mean, I'm sure it was hard, but she always goes, well, yeah, that's why you have lots of kids.
Well, that's true.
It's like we all had our tasks for packing. Mm-hmm. My mom had lists for everybody. Everybody knew exactly what they were supposed to do, when they were supposed to do it. It was super organized, and it was fun. That was like the other thing. It was just a blast.
And everybody's excited about going.
Yeah, exactly.
So, they're just jumping in and know what their job is. That's another big key, is just being organized, just kind of knowing how to, especially the older kids, like you're saying. I mean, if there's 8 of you, there was a 6-week-old at one point in time with a cross-country move, but some of the older ones really can be a valuable help, maybe sometimes more than moms realize.
Yeah, valuable assets.
Definitely. Okay, well, so fun to have you here in the Pacific Northwest.
Yes.
You graduated from New St. Andrews, and I heard rumor that your thesis was on hospitality.
Yes, it was.
So do tell.
So
relive the glory days.
I actually had to pull it out. I was like, what did I say again? I can't remember.
I was so nervous in front of my advisors.
I know. It's been almost a year since I wrote it and submitted it, so I was reading through it yesterday.
Did you have to do an oral presentation with this one? I know some have different formats.
So you have to do a defense first. So you go in and before you write it, you defend it, and then your advisors say yes or no. You can write, or you need to do more research. I had to go back to the drawing board and do some more research before I could write it. And then if you get above like a 95 or something, then you have to redefend publicly, and it's open to anyone in the community who wants to come watch.
Wow, because thankfully they're saying you're so amazing.
Right.
You made it above a 95.
Which I did not. So thankfully I didn't have to do that.
Like, I'm going to aim for a 94.
Exactly. It's like, you good enough to get a good grade, but not good enough to have to do it again.
In front of the public.
Yeah, I know. So I didn't have to do that, but I did have to go in and present the first time. But the reason I wanted to do it was because growing up in Florida, I mean, the community and the culture there, it's just hard. I mean, you're from the southern states. Like, it's just hard to explain Southern hospitality to people out here. I mean, it's not to say that you guys aren't very hospitable, because you are.
Right. But there is something about the culture that's different.
It's just different, and it's hard to explain it. You just feel so warm and welcome from the second that you meet somebody. And if you want to come over for dinner, you go over. You stay there for hours. Like, my parents would always put us to bed at people's houses and then wake us up to take us home. And it was just totally different. And so growing up, my parents kind of had a revolving door to some extent because of where we lived. First of all, there were tons of kids in our neighborhood who just came from really broken homes. And my dad taught in the inner city. And so he would invite his students over, his seniors that he taught over. That's and incredible. My mom would have them out there in their mini skirts and stilettos playing croquet. She'd be like, we are playing this if you're coming over. So
Too bad you wore stilettos.
Exactly.
Next time you'll wear more reasonable shoes. You want to win.
And my mom was super competitive, so she was out there with everybody else, like kicking their butts. It was amazing. So growing up, it was just super normal to have people over for dinner all the time.
And
then
probably offered fellowship to those kids that they had never had before. I mean, what a way to show Christ, you know?
Yeah,
and
definitely.
to make them think, what is different about y'all? What do you have that we don't?
Yeah. And my mom, again, my mom, she's amazing, but she goes, we should always be having more fun than the unbelievers. And that was her motto.
Yes.
And so we always did. All the kids knew that our house was the house where we had a party all the time. And people would come over. Like I said, my dad's students would come over and they didn't really know what to do with us because we were so different. It was like a husband who loved his wife, children who respected their parents and obeyed their parents. And it was just so foreign to them that they kept coming back for more. And so, yeah, it was a really great opportunity. My parents, like, they never sat us down and were like, we are a hospitable family. It was just like what we did.
It just was lived out. It was an overflow of what was in their hearts. It wasn't something they were just trying to force in you. It was kind of what was already in your family.
Yeah, it just was part of our family. And my parents have a family motto, which I don't have memorized, but part of it is this idea of like contagious, dangerous joy and holy fun. That's like 2 phrases they use. And so that's just, I mean, if you know my parents, you just know that you're going to have a good time if you're over at their house. Like, it's just always fun.
That's wonderful.
And so, yeah,
when testimony and encouragement for those of us who need to remember that.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, that we do have the joy of the Lord and we need to show it, you know, and not just be hiding it inside.
Right. It's not optional. So when I moved out, I realized, I think pretty early on, I was like, well, if I still wanted to have people over because I had done that my whole life, but it was my own house. So then I was like, oh man, I need to figure out how to do this thing that my parents have always done because I loved having people over and it's just so fun. Like people coming over, hanging out, eating food. And so I actually remember the first event that I had at my house was just a movie night with some girls my freshman year. And I remember taking a picture of my plate of cookies and I said to my parents, I was like, my first time hosting. And I look back, I'm like, wow, I can't believe I did that.
Oh, I'm sure your mom is so proud.
She might have been.
Her own hospitality and cookies are the best thing to start
exactly.
with.
Exactly. They're so easy, so cheap.
Yes.
So
everybody loves good cookies.
Yeah. So that's kind of where my thesis came from, was the idea of cultivating hospitality as a college student. So that's what my whole thesis is. It's called A Sanctuary Unrealized, and understanding what the home actually does have to offer as a single college student who doesn't have a family to kind of back them up or just follow in their footsteps. And in scripture, it doesn't say that, you know, once you are established with an income and you're married and have children, then that's when you open your home. It's just that Christians are to be hospitable. It's not really like a certain phase of life.
Right. You don't have a past just because you're a college student or a single woman or, you know, married with young children.
Exactly.
It's difficult at every stage, or can look different at every stage.
Right. Yeah. And it's all relative to where you are in life. It's not like you should be throwing like a 5-course meal when you're 18 years old in your house that you share with other people. Like, please don't do that. Like, so everybody's on board.
Right. But I have 5 roommates and I've invited a family of 12 over.
Right. So that's kind of where it stemmed from. And it morphed a lot along the way because I was originally going to be talking about Southern hospitality specifically. And then I realized that was way too hard of a topic to be able to hone in on and tackle. So I kind of scrapped that and just want to talk about hospitality. And then my advisor was Mrs. Dr. Smith at school. I don't know her first name, but I'm sorry for listening to this. Mrs. Dr. Smith is what I always call her. So Ryan Smith's wife. I don't know. Yeah. So she was my advisor and she really pushed me to say, like, define what I mean by hospitality, because when I started thinking about it, there's so many different forms of hospitality that you can do. And so I limited it to just hosting something in your house. So specifically to hosting. Mm-hmm. And then it was like, well, are parents being hospitable to their children when they're serving them dinner every night? Is that hospitality? And I was like, I don't know. I don't want to have to define it this well.
This topic's too difficult. I give up.
I know. So yeah, it was definitely tricky to kind of nail down exactly what I want to talk about, but that's how I came to talk about that topic. It's kind of a two-part thing. So the first one's a biblical defense of why college students should be practicing hospitality. And then the second half is a handbook for how to do that. So like financial tips, kind of what it would look like for you as a college student to be hospitable, and then a bunch of recipes that I've...
And now she is going to read her entire thesis.
No.
Word for word and page by page. So settle in wherever you are.
All 10,000 words.
Well, give us, okay, so if it's broken up into a couple of different sections, tell us maybe just a summary of the first section. Like, why is it important? I know you did mention, the Bible talks about hospitality and doesn't set parameters, doesn't say, well, you're excluded, for instance, if you're a college student. So why was it important to you as a college student to give hospitality? Yeah,
I think there's a huge topic to unpack. I think the main ones that I settled on was, first of all, college, especially anywhere, but at NSA, you're surrounded by Christians, you're surrounded by fellow people, and the academics are very rigorous. So it's super easy to just use your home as a jail where you just lock yourself in. I think there's two different categories that people fall into, where they're either too social and too into fun, or they just lock themselves up and don't build community. And I think that's dangerous for numerous reasons. But one of them just being that those people are going to be with you for the next 4 years and are going to keep you accountable. And if you are just isolating yourself, trying to do the good deed of doing your schoolwork, that's a terrible excuse for isolating yourself and
creating friendships.
Right.
With people around you.
Exactly. And fellowship is so, it's not optional in scripture. Like, you're supposed to worship with your fellow Christians every Sunday, and you're supposed to be in fellowship with them and be in communion with them. If you're just living alone in your house, then you're not being in fellowship with them. So that was one thing that I really kind of honed in on. I'm trying to remember all of the other points that I had, but
while you're thinking of it, what it popped into my head too is also that's kind of a period when you're growing. You come away from your home where maybe mom and siblings helped do all the things. You jumped in all together, like you say, everybody has their task, and now you're on your own, and maybe with other college roommates. Maybe you all decide we're going to do it together. But that's a way you can start your growing and figuring out how to do it and what it looks like for you, and just growing in those hospitality skills, because you don't all of a sudden get married, have some kids, and know how to do it.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. It's building a habit. And if you don't start when you move out and aren't in your parents' home, then you're just never going to start.
Right. Because it doesn't necessarily get easier.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. I think my favorite passage that I talked about was, I think it's in Hebrews, where the author says, paraphrasing here because I don't have it memorized, but always show hospitality, for you never know when you will entertain an angel unawares. And I read that and I was just like, oh my gosh, that is so cool. What if I posted an angel in my house?
Okay, I've already told this story on this podcast, but what's really funny is my parents are very hospitable too. And I heard that as a child, and I don't know how old I was. I mean, fairly young. But I remember because we would have visiting people, people that had come to visit the church, or maybe a guest speaker or something like that. My dad was a pastor during this time when I was this age, and I remember thinking, which one of our guests is the angel unawares? Just kind of looking with big eyes and all, thinking one of them might be.
Yeah. I know. I remember reading that and I was just like, wow, that is crazy. And I also talk about the scene with Abraham and Sarah when the strangers come up, and one of them was the Lord. Like, later it refers to him as the Lord, and that he, served him food and took him in and showed him hospitality. And so I think, I think it's an important concept in scripture, and you shouldn't just put it on hold because you're at an inconvenient time in life to do that, because you're going to always have that excuse for things.
Right.
And it's similar to anything else, like your Bible reading, or you're like, well, when I'm married or when I have kids, that's when it will really matter. So that's when I will learn how to do it. And it's like, well, that's probably not going to happen.
Probably need to just get a jump start.
Right. Yeah.
Well, that's so encouraging. Okay, and then the second part of your thesis you said was more of the practical side of it. So give us some tips
Yeah.
part of it?
I think my biggest thing is when people say, or college students specifically say, well, I don't have enough money. And I get it. Like, I put myself through school. I worked and I had homework and I had grades to keep up and I rode during college. So I was always busy and I also always had extra money. If I can do it, you can definitely do it.
Girl with a budget queen.
Well, my mom, again, has always, like, since we were little, we would get allowances. I think we got $3 a week and for doing our chores. Yeah. And 10% was tithe. We had a mercy money bucket that was like, if we saw somebody homeless or if there was someone at church who needed funds, or we just had a mercy money bucket. And then we also had spending and savings. So every week we would literally get change and we would budget out our allowance from the time I was young.
I love that. That's such a great tip for parents, especially young parents.
Yeah.
You know, to really kind of think through that as well, starting from a young age, because there's a lot of teenagers and young adults who know nothing about money and they get into so much trouble because they spend it all or get credit cards. You know, they just don't have a financial education. So that's a great way to start.
Yeah. And my parents, my parents did a really great job of doing that. So when I came to school, I mean, basically my budget was whatever I don't spend on things to actually live, I'm going to be giving to school. So it was very easy to budget that way because I didn't have any extra money. But I think the biggest thing is really sitting down and saying, like, knowing exactly where every dollar is going. And you'll find, like, you buy, $1.50 worth of Skittles in the library, or you spend, like, your loose cash on, whatever it is, like a coffee or whatever it is. You'll find that you probably have like $10 a week that you're spending on things that you don't really need. And so that was my biggest tip, was like, figure out where all your money's going. Also choose your job accordingly. So I worked at Bootzer's for 4 years, and this is not a plug to tell people to go work at Bootzer's, but I loved working there. But it was super great to work at a food service job.
By the way.
Oh, right. Yeah. Sorry.
Shop and pub.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Bootzer's Coffee House and Pub. Yeah. So I worked there, and we had any expired food, because like after 3 days in the bake case, we can't sell it. And so it was paninis and salads and cake and scones and all this stuff. And it was just all in the back for us to eat. So that was it was, a huge blessing because all of us are college students who work there. So our boss was a huge blessing to us, and we get discounts, we get a free drink when we work. And it was just a really great way to save on money. Just like finding a good job that will help you do that. Like working at a, Humble Burger, or like I've had roommates who work at Tapped and Humble Burger, and like they're always getting free food there. So
I have always thought that's a great idea for college students, and maybe they find something else better. But I had a son that did the same thing. He worked at it had lots of things, but it was burgers, fish, just this is kind of a small restaurant, but it was specific to more burgers and fish platters and things like that. But he got a free meal every time he went. And it was, for a growing, this is the one who's now 6'3" and 200 pounds.
Oh my gosh.
Feeding him was quite the, when he finally ended up leaving the house, all of a sudden, we're like, we're rich. Not really.
That's funny.
We love you, Tim.
Yeah. That's so good.
Just him being able to go and eat on shift was like, yes, score. He has a free meal. Totally worth it. And not only could we get free things there, but we didn't have to pay to buy a drink when we study there, because, it's just common courtesy to buy something at a coffee shop when you're going to study there, because you're using their Wi-Fi, you're taking up space that another paying customer could be using. So that was a really nice thing. Our boss told us, she was like, if you guys come study here, you work here, you don't have to pay. So I could study there for free, and I got food. So and a free coffee, which is like what you said before, sometimes we end up spending a lot of extra money on a $5 coffee here and a $5 coffee there. So if you get one every shift, that's kind of a fun treat. If you're telling yourself, okay, I'm not going to spend money on that.
Right. Yeah. So those would be 2 tips. Know where your money's going and pick your job accordingly, because it definitely makes a big difference.
So then you were able to see, okay, how much money do I have left to spend on, say, a fun meal, or having people over to do cookies or whatever else.
Yeah, in my thesis, I wrote this one section. I was reading back. I was like, wow, that was a really punchy line. But it was like,
smarter than I thought.
I read this one sentence where I wrote, those $5 you could buy a dessert with. And you totally can, because I host every week. We have a Bible study at my house, and my roommate and I host one together through CRF. So,
Collegiate Reformed
Fellowship. Yep. Yeah. It's a college outreach program in Moscow.
Okay.
And so my roommate and I go and we do a study with Mrs. Gray, who's the leader. And then we take those notes and we teach it to the girls. So it's not our own, our own writing, but it's really helpful to have the outline. But it's 7:30 p.m. on a Tuesday night. So, usually people are coming to Bible studies thinking there'll be coffee or tea or dessert. And it's so easy to go make Rice Krispie treats.
That's so
You buy like $1.79 bag of marshmallows, and Rice Krispies are basically weightless. So it's like $2 a pound, and you can get a whole pound. So it's like $4 right there, and you have a whole dessert.
Right.
So
the most expensive thing now is the better.
Right, exactly.
Which is skyrocketing.
Yeah.
But even when you're doing a small group, you don't have to make that many even. So
Right. Yeah.
That's a great idea. Okay. And then at the end of your thesis, you said you had recipes and tips. So throw any of those in there that you want to. I'll specifically ask you a favorite menu you do choose to serve. And it could be recipes from your thesis or something else.
So the recipe that I prepared today is just burrito bowls, because I make those all the time for myself and for other people.
Okay, you probably perfected it. So do tell us all about it.
Yeah, and it was actually kind of hard because I don't have a recipe. I kind of just make it up as I go. And so I can type something up afterwards of kind of what I do. But I was thinking about it, and it's really just kind of whatever I have on hand, and also what's really easy to pick up from the store. So I usually use chicken because it's just cheap and easy. Pro tip, when you're cooking chicken, use brown sugar. It sounds really weird. I don't know if you've ever heard this, but
on top of the raw chicken breast?
So with your seasoning. So like if you use paprika or chili powder, chili flakes, salt, pepper, whatever you're going to use, cumin, that's what I usually use. That's kind of the whole spice mix I use. I just throw in a couple tablespoons of brown sugar, and it helps keep the chicken moist, but it also, like, you can't taste it at all, but it brings out the flavor so much.
That really does sound like, we do have some different rubs that we've done on meats before, and I know some of them have had brown sugar, and that may be countrywide, but I know for sure we have those in the South. So that is a great tip, because I don't think I've done it on chicken.
Yeah, and I first did it because my mom makes this really great salad. It's a pork sirloin with like shredded cabbage and a bunch of other random stuff. And the sirloin you sear on the rub, and then you bake it, and then you slice it and serve it on top of the salad cold. And I'm not even kidding you. It's one of my favorite recipes ever. It's so good. I can also send that one to you if you want.
Mom, we're sharing your recipe. Sorry.
It's so good. And there's brown sugar in it.
Amazing.
And at first I was kind of like, Mom, this sounds really gross. She was like, I think it was the first time we made it, and I was helping her. I was like, Mom, brown sugar. Like, I am not a fan of sweet and savory. Okay. So I was just like, I don't know if we're going to like this. She goes, just do it. And it was one of the best things I've ever had. So, and you can't taste it. So if you're not a fan of sweet and savory, you can't taste the brown sugar, but it just adds something.
It somehow highlights everything else.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. So anyways, but for burrito bowls, I just use chicken, and rice is a really great way to stretch it. So if you are trying to cook for a big crowd, cook a bunch of rice. Beans, I do not like getting canned refried beans because I grew up spoiled. My grandma and my mom are both phenomenal Mexican food cooks, and so we always refried our own beans.
Which lucky gal.
I know. And I remember having
delicious.
I remember having canned refried beans. I was like, what is this?
What is this substance that I'm tasting?
Yeah, so I always refry my own beans, but it's super easy. You just boil them, saute them in some onions, and then mash them up, and salt to taste. Super easy. So
do you take canned beans and do it with that, or your mom starts from scratch?
We start I didn't even know you could buy beans in the can until I got into college. So
because your mom is so incredible.
I remember Pillsbury rolls. I remember telling my mom, I was like, Mom, do you know they make biscuits in a can? And she looked at my head, she goes, yes, my kids don't know what Pillsbury is.
But it's funny because when all of that stuff first came out, I guess in the 50s or 60s, And, you know, that was the reaction of these ladies who worked so hard in the kitchen and made everything home. And it's like, yes, finally a canned product. And now and maybe they realized it later, you know, pretty quickly. Or, you know, now later it's kind of like, oh, no, wait, that's not as good as the homemade version.
We don't want those, so.
Those Marina cans are just, not when you've had homemade.
Right, exactly. So we always grew up just getting those big, my mom has 5-gallon buckets in her bulk section. We have like wheat berries that we grind ourselves and oats and all that stuff. So everything was from scratch growing up. So I didn't know what half this stuff was until I was in college. But we had a big thing of pinto beans, and you just go and grab a scoop out and put it in the pot and let them simmer for a few hours, like probably 4 hours or so. Just add more water as they boil. Always do less beans than you think you're going to need because they double in size. And so you will be eating beans for a long time.
If you go and get multiple scoops out of the bucket.
Exactly.
So then you said to make refried beans when you boil them and they're done. Then how do you do the refried beans?
So you drain them and rinse them, which is commonly why people have gas when they eat beans because of the preservatives, especially in canned beans, the juice that it's in, that it's canned in, that's what upsets people's stomach. So, and then my mom always rinsed out our beans with just regular tap water. And then we sauteed onions with olive oil and then put the beans in it and then add some water. So it's like a little bit thinner. And you can add water to whatever texture you want it to be, if you want thicker or whatever. And then we either got a potato masher, do you know those? Or what we used for a long time before we even had that was just a mason jar. So we would just put a mason jar and push them down and squish the beans to the bottom of the pan and just do that until they were all squished up.
You took a mason jar and used that kind of
as my masher, yeah.
Oh, no.
We just mashed it with the mason jar. Yep. Yeah.
That's a great tip if you don't have a potato masher. Because most people have a mason jar. They can go down
or a cup or something.
Something. Anything will work. Just have it start mashing.
Yeah.
So beans, rice, chicken. What else do you top with?
And then it's just kind of whatever you want. So tomatoes, sour cream, cilantro, lettuce, whatever you want. So that's what we always put on it. Lime, if you want lime juice on it. Pico de gallo or salsa, whatever you want on top. So, yeah. Cheese. Yeah, sorry, I forgot that. The best part. Yeah, and not just everybody, it's usually really allergy friendly, which I'm gluten free. So it was a huge blow when I figured out I was gluten free, but I found tons of ways around it. So it's allergy friendly, really easy to change the recipe if someone needs it, because they can just add the toppings they don't want or take those out or whatever. So,
yes.
Yeah.
And if somebody was dairy free, they could just leave off the cheese.
Right.
They'd still be able to build the rest of the bowl.
Yep, exactly. So
that really is a great meal for guests. So do you use any shortcuts or time savers when making a burrito bowl for company coming over? Is there a way you make it go quicker, like preparing ahead of time?
Sometimes I'll chop things up earlier in the day. So all the lettuce or tomatoes or avocado, whatever you're going to put on it, sometimes it just takes forever to get all the chopping done. So I'll do that earlier in the day. You can also cook the chicken earlier if you need to, and you just need to, assemble it, but right before. But burrito bowls are so easy already. It's kind of maybe 30, 40 minutes of prep and then you're ready. So, yeah.
Oh, that's great.
Yep.
Unless you're cooking the beans. I guess you would have to do
Oh, that's true. Yeah.
If you were making them from homemade, but you could do.
Right. Canned beans, definitely. Yeah.
So you typically do refried beans with your burrito bowls versus say black beans?
Sometimes, yeah, it really depends. Sometimes I'll just go to the store and grab. Again, we also always used to boil our own black beans. So, but you can totally use the can. But if you do get them from the can, make sure to rinse them off because that syrup that they're sitting in is really gross.
Well, that is interesting to know because a lot of recipes I make soup recipes and things, and I'll say like black beans rinsed.
Right.
And I always thought, that juice in there doesn't look too appealing, but I didn't realize that was what contained the actual part that messed up people's stomachs.
Yeah.
So that's so interesting.
Yeah, I know. Fun fact.
I haven't researched it quite.
Yeah. Well, I didn't. My mom did. So I'm just quoting her.
Another shout out to Mom.
Yeah.
What is your best prep tip when you're having company over? So that could be anything from how you find cooking inspiration or shopping or a cleaning tip, but how do you prepare?
I actually, so if I don't want to do, if I know that there's people coming over and I don't want to do my normal burrito bowl or brunch, I often have brunch too. I literally have done this before. I'll just like yummy dinner recipes for a crowd. Just Google it. Just Google it. There's no shame. There's really great recipes out there and you can tweak it. I almost never follow the recipe the way that it says. If it's cooking, if it's baking, I'm always like to the T, but
cooking, there's a lot of artistic flair.
Right.
And you get better at it as you do more of it.
Right. Yeah. So I just look up recipes or like cheap recipes for a crowd or, you know, if we're doing like a fancier, like we've done a sit down for our Bible study girls, we'll do like a sit down dinner, finals week for them. And so we've done like a really fancy, we looked up recipes for that. And yeah, honestly, Googling is so helpful.
It gives you some unique things that maybe you wouldn't have tried before. And if some of you out there might be thinking, oh, well, I'm not good at tweaking or changing, and how do I know it's not going to be a disaster? Well, you don't.
Just pray.
It potentially might be a disaster. But a lot of places have reviews, and you can see what people's comments are. And you can also see sometimes down below in the comments what helps me is how people have changed it a little bit, and it is a change that I feel like that my family would like that more or something like that. So sometimes you can kind of read and figure out what you might want to do a little bit different, or just try it as is and see. Once you make it once, is it something you will ever make again?
Right.
If so, how would you change it then? You know, make notes to what your family liked. Do it need more salt or more seasonings or less beans or whatever.
Right.
You know.
Yeah. And don't experiment if you're having people over too. Definitely not. I mean, you can if you want to, but
I learned that the hard way, and then I still do it. In fact, I'm making a big salad tonight, but I don't know if I would say it's just a total experiment. Because
right.
My friend did give me the recipe, but I personally have never made it before, and I'm making it tonight for a crowd. So, I'll let you know.
It'll be good. Yeah, it'll be good. It'll be good. I think salads are usually easier because you can kind of anticipate what it's going to taste like before you're done with it, but it'll be good.
It'll be good. What is your best advice for showing warm hospitality to those coming into your home?
That is a really good question because this is actually my take, I think is kind of controversial, but you'll have to tell me. Okay. So I actually always think that leaving something for the guest to do until dinner's ready is super helpful. So if I come over to somebody's house, and I know you actually talked about this when we did the showing of Even Exile, you were saying like in the South, it's like, what can I bring? What can I do? How can I help? And here it's just like, come over. And I'm like, but I feel useless. I need to do something to not feel awkward, especially if it's someone you don't know.
Right.
And so I don't know if my parents actually did this or not. I'm sure they did, but in my experience, it's been if I leave them to set the table or if I leave something for them to stir on the stove or to just jump in with you, it's way easier to dissipate the awkwardness, or if somebody's new, to spark conversation that way. And actually, I will say my mom did do this a lot. Since we homeschooled, there'd be other moms who'd be like, can I go get coffee with you? And my mom was like, I don't want to go get coffee. Just come over and help me fold laundry.
Right.
So,
I can't leave my 8 children and all the neighborhood kids. Sorry.
Yeah. And honestly, I'm not a big fan of like going and grabbing coffee with someone you don't know very well, because it's like, what are you just going to sit there with a cup in your hands and just look at each other across the table? I just think it's kind of awkward. So coming over
to jump into helping you in your kitchen,
right?
And there's a group, and
yep. And so
together.
Just having them be like, oh, can you set the table, or do you want to chop this up, or just helping, like incorporating them in what you're doing, I think is often makes them actually feel welcome instead of. Some people are like, well, it's putting them to work. They came here to relax. And it's like, no, they came here for fellowship. And sometimes that means working.
Exactly. So, I don't know that they would count it as work. I know I wouldn't, because, really, if you ever host the meal, the work is the grocery shopping, getting the groceries up the stairs or down the stairs or in the house, all the prep, all the cooking, a small little chop at the end is nothing.
Right, exactly. Yeah. So that's what I would say.
What is your must-have kitchen item, and where can we find it?
I was actually thinking about this because I could not. I was like, I don't know, because I've lived with.
Mason jar.
Yeah, I know. Because I've lived since my almost 5 years being here. I've always had tons of roommates. So my first house was with 5 girls. My second house had anywhere from 7 to 10 girls at one point, and the house I live in now has 6 of us. So we've all kind of like made do with whatever we all brought to the table for the kitchen. And so a lot of times it was like really dull knives, or like we didn't have a KitchenAid that worked, or we had like a hand mixer but with one beater. So I was trying to think, I'm like, I actually, like, I don't have a must have because I've made do without all of these things for 5 years. Somehow, I mean, we've limped along, but
that's great advice though.
Yeah, that's true.
You can be really creative with little.
It's true. Yeah. But I was talking.
Work as tools.
I know.
They're not designed to be that.
Exactly.
Like a mason jar.
So I was talking with Belle today, actually, because we were at the missions conference together. And I was telling her, I was like, oh, I'm doing the podcast today. She goes, what's your must-have kitchen item? I was like, that's the one thing I don't know. So we were talking, and then we came up, cutting boards came up. And I was like, oh, what you really do need to have is one plastic cutting board, because for all of your meat, do not cut it on the wood cutting boards. That just is really gross and unsanitary.
Grooves that you cannot fully clean.
Right, exactly. So you definitely need at least one plastic cutting board. That is my,
That can be
which
washed in the dishwasher. If you have a dishwasher,
sprayed down, right? Yeah. And that is one thing that I have always had. So despite being without all of other things, we've always had one plastic cutting board. So.
Oh, I thought you meant dishwasher.
Oh, well, we also have been without a dishwasher. So.
So you are hand washing the plastic.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah, that's a great tip. Okay, so you have a funny story for us.
Yes, I actually have. I'll tell the one about my sister-in-law.
Definitely tell that one first. This is great.
So my sister-in-law, Naomi Tate, for those of you who know her, I was talking with her because I heard that you wanted to have me on the podcast, and I couldn't remember what it was called. So I was trying to figure out. I was like looking it up online. I couldn't figure it out. So I texted my sister-in-law, and I was like, "Hey, what's Bess Hawthorne's podcast called?" And she just responds with, "Come over for dinner." And I didn't know what her podcast name was, so I thought she was telling me that I had to come over for dinner for her to tell me. And I just go, oh, I really wish I could, but I'm busy tonight. I was like, can you just tell me what the name of her podcast is, please? And then like 10 minutes later, I realized that was the name of her podcast. And so we were texting about that. I was at work. I was sitting in my cubicle just like laughing.
Like your sister-in-law's holding you hostage until you come see her.
I know. I was like, why can't you just tell me the name of her podcast?
I just want to listen to an episode, okay?
It was so funny.
I'll see you for dinner some other time.
But
great.
my actual cooking story that's funny is I went through a phase in, I think it was 7th or 8th grade. So I was still homeschooled then. I started going to school in high school. And I went through this phase where I just loved baking, and I would just ask my mom if I could bake, and she was like, sure. And so she would let me bake whatever I wanted, and I would just make new things, old things, all of the things. So, and I just found out that I was gluten-free when I was like 14. So I was trying to make these peanut butter bars that my mom had a recipe for forever, but I was making 2 different batches, one like a smaller one for me and my sister, and then the rest for our family. And I made them. They were super great. They came out looking great. And I put them on the burners, I just put them like on the stovetop, and I walk away. And it was probably like 30 minutes later, I hear something that sounded like a gunshot. I was like, what? And I run to the kitchen, and there is glass everywhere, all inside of the peanut butter bars everywhere. And my mom comes in, and apparently one of the burners had been on, and I'd set the 9x13 on a burner, and it had like heated up enough that it actually exploded in our kitchen. And I'm so thankful that none of my siblings were in there because that could have like killed somebody. And I just like had an exploding 9x13 in our kitchen, and I was trying to save them by like vacuuming out the pieces of glass. And my mom was like, we cannot eat this.
No, there's little tiny shards.
I know. I was like, but Mom, you can't see them. And she was like, that could still tear up your intestines.
That is heartbreaking.
I know.
That is really funny that you mentioned that story because I had forgotten that I did the same thing. How old did you say you were?
I think I was 13 or 14.
I was an adult with children. 4 of them. And we were living in Paris, Texas at the time for a short time. My husband had a job there for about a year, but we were traveling back to Texarkana, which was, I think, about an hour away. Maybe it was an hour and a half. And I was in a hurry, we were trying to get on the road, packing up myself and the 4 children. We were gone for the weekend, trying to do all the things. But I was bringing a dessert to wherever. I don't know. I'm sure eating with my parents, maybe having friends over. But I had this just beautiful 9x13 pan of blonde brownies.
Oh, yes.
For a while. And had totally forgotten that I had made a frosting to go on top, but the burner was hot, similar to, it wasn't on, but it was still boiling hot for me making the frosting that I had set over to the side. Pulled out the pan to cool on the stove, just threw it on top of the stove, and then ran back and forth, loading and loading and loading and loading, not unloading.
Yeah.
Loading and loading. Same exact thing.
Oh my gosh.
Exploded.
It was so loud.
Yes. Thankfully no children were in there.
I know.
Same thing.
Oh my goodness.
I remember just being like you, thinking, can I dig?
Can I save this anyway?
No, it all goes in the trash.
And not only that, a perfectly good 9x13 was just exploded.
Gone. No pan, no frosting. Because the frosting was sitting there too.
Oh, right. Yeah.
It's not like that was not.
Oh, man.
I could solace myself by just eating the frosting.
Right.
There's nothing to put it on, so why do I need it?
I know. And it was funny because that was just like a common trope in my childhood. I broke so many dishes that actually for a number of years I was outlawed from carrying or handling any dishes. It was years.
Plastic.
Yeah. And I remember, I think that age was right where I was getting out of that phase, and I broke, no joke, my parents got this beautiful wedding dish set, just dishes upon dishes. I broke basically every single one of them. I even broke a salt shaker, and I don't even know how you do that. And my parents were finally they waited a long time to outlaw me, but they were like, you may not. And it was so embarrassing because people would come over for dinner and I was not allowed to help to clear the table. And so I looked like I was not helping and being lazy.
Did you trip, or were you just kind of clumsy?
I was super clumsy. I was really tall. So I was really tall. I was not super coordinated. Yeah. And it would slip. It would fall. I was loading the dishwasher, spices. I would break spice. I would try and get spices down, and the glass jars would fall and shatter. And it was just, I don't know how, but I think I've kind of, I don't remember all the incidences because I just don't remember. But finally my parents invested in plastic dishes because of me.
Will not break when she helps clean the table.
It was terrible.
I have some white square dishes, which I just love, but I really keep thinking I need to replace them because the corners with square, I don't know, round might chip just as easily, but the corners, when I look back to how they chipped, I just remember my children loading the dishwasher, and I would remind them, and gently try to remember, don't clunk them in there. Don't be careful. But I remember hearing kids helping in the kitchen and hearing those dishes banging, slamming, and I think another one might have just chipped.
Oh no.
So lots of corners are nice and chipped on our well-worn, well-loved set of dishes.
Oh, that's so good.
I have yet to replace. I still have a 10th grader at home though, so maybe I should, like your parents, just wait a little bit longer.
Yeah. But then the grandkids will come. And
that's true. Just keep them.
You never know.
Don't replace them. Well, those are great stories and just great reminders that we are not perfect and we all make mistakes and disasters happen, and the best thing to do is just to laugh and be joyful about them and show the world that we as Christians are the most fun, most joyous people on earth.
Yes.
And well, hopefully that will make them want to ask us, what is the hope within you? Why? How are you different?
Definitely.
So,
yeah.
Well, thank you so much for being here with me.
Of course. Oh, it was so fun. I'm glad I got to find the time. I know there was so many scheduling.
Well, when I heard you were going to be in Florida for a while
Yeah.
coming up. I thought, well, we better get this in now.
Yeah. I know, I'm glad. I know there's so many things I need to do before I leave, but I just have till June. So end of
good.
June. Yeah. It'll be a little bit. So.
Oh, that's so fun.
Yep.
Well, all the best on that, and